Hey YouTube, it's Jaden again, and in this video we're going to be covering the Thunder Empire deck build that I gave you guys about 2-3 weeks ago. I'm going to show you how I've changed it, how I've altered it, and how it will affect the new limited or restricted, I forget the name that Bushiroad gave the list. It's basically their form of a ban list if you've ever played Yu-Gi-Oh! So obviously, before I get into the deck profile, we're going to go over what was touched, and then I will show you the deck profile. I'll explain the changes I made, and we'll go from there. So we will just jump straight into it. So obviously, we're talking about Thunder Empire, and under the new list, there were 3 cards that were touched for us. The first of which was Connect Ninja to Motion. Connect Ninja to Motion, guys. This card really is busted as fuck. I don't know why Bushiroad is smart. They know when to make a card hollow or foil because they know those are cards that they can really cash out on. This card could have been a double rare and probably sold somewhere between 10 to 12 bucks a piece, maybe more. And it's because of the consistency of this card. He has no call cost, he has no downside whatsoever, and he has decent attack stats. So there's really no negative to him at all. And you know, some people are like, well, he is only 1 crit, but you are playing this card essentially for his effect. Whenever another Thunder Empire monster enters the field while he's on the field, you get to search the top 3 cards of your deck, and then you get to add one of those 3 cards to your hand after you reveal it to your opponent. This is stupid. He basically gives you a way every single turn to add another card. And it can be anything. It can be an impact. It can be your weapon. It can be your monster. It can be a spell. This card is just insane, and you may now only play 1 copy of it in the deck. In a Thunder Empire deck. And then the next card was the Fighter's Oath. Now, the Fighter's Oath, guys, when I heard that we were getting a hit list, ban list, whatever the fuck, I knew this was going to get hit. I knew this was the one card that was going to get touched. I'm actually surprised they touched Emotion, but I don't blame them, and I see why they did it. I thought that this may get hit to like 2, but still at 1, it's a justifiable hit, guys. It really is. But this right here, I am shocked this just didn't get straight up banned. Because the only deck this can be played in is a Thunder Empire deck. And it states whenever it is activated, you gain +1 gauge and +1 life for each different world that's on your field. And with the combination of cards like Wibbly and getting, like, you summon Wibbly and you dump Mazaria, so he counts as a Dragon World, a Dungeon World, and a Legend World monster. You have your Satsuki equipped. You have your Darkness Dragon World set spell activated, and you summon something else that's another world. That's 6 worlds right there. So if that situation happened, bam, 6 life, 6 gauge, just like that. And this card literally had to get hit, guys. This card was stupid. I remember playing this in Houston, and when I would slap this down on my map, my opponents would always just roll their eyes and go, "Ugh, that card." There was someone who made the comment to me that their annoyance with this card is because I essentially every time I used it, I would gain 3 to 4. I would always gain somewhere between 3 and 4. So I would get 3 gauge and 3 life, or 4 life and 4 gauge, and I would slap this down. And one time, some guy made the comment, you know what the big problem with this card is? It pretty much negates what your opponent did the previous turn. And that's pretty true, because think about it. If typically your opponent is going to take out the biggest threat on your board every turn if they can. If they don't see themselves winning that turn, and they're not just going to go for a full assault at you. So you might receive 3 to 4 damage. So bam, I gain all that back. Your turn meant nothing, and I get all this gauge that I can just now spam for spells, monsters, whatever I want. So this is a justifiable hit, guys. So for those of you who are complaining about it, please stop. And then last is Loud Voice. This card also, guys, is probably one of the best shield cards or defensive spells that Buddy Fight or Bushiroad has ever created. It states, whenever you cast this card, you may discard any number of cards out of your hand. And when you do, for each card you discard, your opponent's monsters For that turn, lose 3,000 attack, 3,000 defense, and +1 critical. The power is nothing. It's the crits that are the problem, guys. There was so many games in Houston when I went in shit. I don't remember when. June, and you would slap this down. Your opponent would you would ditch 2, 3 cards, whatever it be. All their monsters that turn lose 2 or 3 crit. There's no point in them attacking you directly because, and if you have Satsuki equipped, they can't even hit you at that point. If most monsters can't, after shaving 6,000 off their attack power, and they might be able to take out 1 to 2 monsters on your board if they're lucky with link attacks and all that. So this card also had to get hit. Well, if you were going to hit 2 cards, these are the ones that needed to get hit the most. This card I think they could have left alone and people would have been okay with. But I don't know. You tell me. Out of these 3, I think it's this one is the biggest problem because it's just here have a lot of gauge and a lot of life for nothing. This true does give you a free plus. This is just for defense. But all 3 of them got hit to 1, which means in a Thunder Empire Flags deck, you may only main deck or sideboard one of these cards. So I'm going to go through the deck, and I will explain the changes I made because there are some changes that happen because of the list. Please know that the deck is still extremely viable. It does not make Thunder Empire any less broke. So for the Buddy Monster, it is still going to be Awaken as Thunder Emperor bots. This is just too good a card. You just simply remove a Thunder Empire off the field, slap him down, 7,000 power, 2 crits, 4k defense, with the ability to restand a card by paying 1 gauge, and if you're at 4 life or less, when you activate that skill, he stands up as well. So when you're at 4 life or less, he essentially gets triple attack for nothing. And his call cost is take a Thunder Empire and send it to the drop zone, so no gauge cost. This is just simply the best bots, in my opinion. We're still playing 1 copy of Drago Royale. I just swapped in the Buddy Rare version I picked up at Texas. Simply because he's still too good not to play at least 1 copy of. We all know what he does. He has an infinite attack power. He gets hextuple attack with his overthrow ability, and he basically cannot be touched for the most part. And swings 6 times and just ruins your opponent's day. So, still play the 1 copy of Miseria just because he is a deck reset. He is an easy target to ditch with Wibbly to get 2 different worlds in your drop zone, because this deck still does have play cards where you need to have a certain amount of worlds in your drop zone. And if you just draw dead and you do manage to scoop this, you can summon this and just get yourself a reset. You know, maining 2 of this also is an option, and I have considered it. So then obviously we play our 4 copies of, you know, bots. So we have our 5 total for that. So there's that. And then next we still play our 4 copies of Globes because he helps increase our consistency. Anytime a Thunder Empire enters the field, gauge and draw. When he swings, give +1 crit to any card on the field, including himself. 4 Operative Spear. When he enters play, gauge +1 gauge, +1 life, and if you have 2 different worlds on the field, draw a card. Still very easy to break off, and I actually do still play the 1 copy that I'm allowed of Connect Ninja to Motion. To Motion, guys, is only allowed to be a 1 of anymore, but when you see him, he is still too good not to have. Plus, if he does manage his way over to the drop zone, there are ways to get him back. You play so much draw power in this deck that eventually you're going to get to still play with him. You're just not going to see him as rarely, or as often, I'm sorry. But he is still a good 1 of, because remember, guys, when you could play, like I said in the last video that I made where I covered the deck, when you play 4 Globes, 4 Sphere, and 4 this guy, it was literally the most consistent engine in Buddy Fight, because 2 of them give you gauges and draws. 1 gives you a life. This one gives you a search, which is essentially just as good as a draw. So it literally does nothing but make you plus and gain resources. And still playing 1 is smart. I don't see why you wouldn't still play 1 just because he is really, really good. Now, a new monster that was in the sideboard but is now in the main board to the Katana World names is 2 copies of Vagrant Dragon Seimaru. 4,000 power, 1 crit, 2,000 defense. Whenever he enters play, you place the top card of your deck into the gauge, and then if you have 2 or more different worlds on the field, you can select one of your opponent's monsters and bounce it back to their hand. So if they have a monster there in the center and you don't have Satsuki equipped, you can get rid of it. This helps you get rid of Athora. It can help you get rid of Soul. He's just a good card, and also if you just want to remove their monsters for whatever reason, you can just go, hey, get that off my board. So he's good. And then still playing the 2 copies of Wibbly, which is, your search a monster, drop it to the drop zone, and he gains whatever worlds are listed on that card. So, and then if there are 3 different worlds in the drop zone, he gets plus 3,000 attack and plus 1 crit, so he becomes 6,000 power and 3 crits. So he is still a good card. New addition is 2 copies of Giant Bird Thunderbird from Legend World. So his first skill is really not that great unless you revive him with in the name of the Thunder Empire, because whenever he enters the field due to a card effect, you get 2 gauge, which is nice. But the reason he's in here is because when he swings, if you have 3 or more Thunder Empire or Whiter Sarkal on the field, you get to draw cards. So he gives you more pluses. And in testing, if you have your buddy monster bots over here, you can swing him for your opponent with 2, pay a gauge, restand him, and swing again. So you can basically draw 2 cards with him. So, 2,000 power, 2 crits, 1k defense. Nothing too special, but he is another world. He is more Legend World since I had to cut 2 copies of Fighter's Oath. So, he's good. 2 copies of Yellow Bat. This is now the only card in the deck that I discard with. I cut Loud Voice completely. This is not necessary at 1. I can see why people still play it, but the reason this card was so good is you played more discard outlets, so you could play the Magic World Vanilla, because I cut Vanilla, and but the only way I could really see Validity still using this is if I upped my count of Yellow Bat and Vanilla, and that's just not going to happen. Yellow Bat is still a good 2 of. I only played 1 in my previous build, so I upped him up to 2. Only 2,000 power, 1 crit, 1k defense, but when he enters the field, you may discard a card from your hand, put the top card of your deck into the gauge, and then if you have another Thunder Empire on the field, you can draw cards. So he does give you another charge and draw. So, and he's another Dungeon World name. And like I said, we are still playing 4 copies of Satsuki G. Satsuki G is still one of my favorite cards in the deck. I'm sorry. 12,000 power, 3 crits, plus penetrate, with this box's ability to restand it and swing twice, and using its overturn to just get more attacks is just too appealing to me. Like I said in my last video, there were people who just don't like the Satsuki variant, and I love it, so it works for me. Now we're getting into the spells. So I cut 1 copy of Red Thunder Emperor Dragon. I cut 1 copy of Red Thunder Emperor's Awakening to only 3. And that's because since we have less search power, since we don't have Force to Motion anymore, I replaced some cards to include 3 copies of Bots X-Link. If you'll remember in my earlier Bots deck profiles, I said that this is the best spell in Dragon World, and I still stand by it. If you're looking at spells that can be played in just Dragon World in general, this is the best spell, guys. And just for a little bit of knowledge here, 1 second. I have stocked up on this card. because if you are planning to build Dragon World decks, this card is it's a must. Well, I don't want to say it's a must, but if you're looking for something for a good filler card that's going to do you some positives for the game, this gets you a life, it gets you 2 gauge, and it basically lets you have Tomotion's ability. You get to look at the top 3 cards of the deck. You add one of them into your hand, but instead of putting them on the bottom of your deck, you put them in your gauge and you gain a life. So Bot's X-Link, guys, is an amazing card, and there are some times where I think I might actually push this to 4. But Red Thunder Emperor's Awakening is still good too, because you gain a gauge and a life out of it, and then if you have 3 or more worlds in your drop zone, you get a card back from your drop zone, any card you want. And then if there's 6 or more in there, you also get to draw. So, you know, Bot's X-Link is a very good card to add for more consistency. I added an extra copy of Demon Lord's Raging Dragon Blast, Roaring Dragon Blast. This card also is just too good. It is a pay 2 gauge to destroy every monster your opponent has, and then you draw that many cards. It's just another card to help wipe your opponent's board so you can push for your big attacks, you can push for an OTK, and you can draw. So it's really, really good. Up to 4 copies of Black Sandcastle, simply because this is still the only Darkness Dragon World card that we play. It prevents your opponent from bouncing your monsters back to your hand, so if you're playing against Magic World and you have this on the field, they're just going to cry. And they're not going to cry, but the main way that they get their opponent's monsters off the board outside of nullifying it is bouncing it. So this prevents your opponent from bouncing your monsters, and during their turn, if they're going to start dealing you a lot of damage, you can remove your Black Sandcastle to reduce the next damage you take by 3 points, which is pretty good considering most damage reducers are 1 and 2. And you can literally set all 4 copies of this on the field. There was one game in Houston, because at Houston I played this only at 3. I had all 3 of them set on the field. So it's, if you get them, slap them on the field. It's essentially a shield. Speaking of shields, 3 copies of Jupiter Barrier. Jupiter Barrier is the only Star Dragon World card still in the deck. Whenever you cast this card, it nullifies the attack. But if you have a card on the field with soul in it, you may remove a card from that card's soul. You get +1 life, +1 gauge, and you draw a card. So it's essentially Blue Dragon Shield, Green Dragon Shield, and Thunder Empire's Shield, or Thunder Emperor's Shield all in one. So you get 1 gauge, 1 life, 1 draw. So obviously you can still use this to nullify an attack if you don't have Satsuki on board, but chances are you're going to have Satsuki on board. 2 copies of Drago Uno, just in case your opponent is fixing to finish you off and you have at least 5 different worlds represented in your drop zone. Cast this, discard your hand, draw 6 new cards. You cannot lose that turn, and then on your opponent's turn when you cast this, and then you get 1 more turn to try and finish them off. If you do not finish them off on your next turn, you lose. But in Houston, this did win me a game. It is a very good card. It can save you. So it's still a viable card in my opinion. 1 copy of the Fighter's Oath. I'm still going to play this at 1, guys. You can get it. You can even reuse it because of Red Thunder Emperor's Dragon and Awakening, so that you will be able to reuse this. This card is just too busted not to play, even at 1, so... And then 1 copy of In the Name of the Thunder Empire. This card has almost been cut so many times, but it won me 1 game in Houston, so I'm going to stick with it for a little longer. Pay 2 life and reborn any 2 Thunder Empire monsters from your drop zone to your field by paying their call cost. Just keep in mind that if you want to revive bots, you have to have a monster in play when you cast this, because you still have to remove a monster from the field to summon him. You can't just summon bots for free. You still have to remove that monster. Because his call cost states, put a Thunder Empire from your field into the drop zone. Now, just for argument's sake, if you have multiple copies of Black Sand Castle, or you have a copy of Black Sand Castle set, this is technically a Thunder Empire, and you can remove it to summon bots, but typically I only do that in times when that's my only option or I'm going for game. I would much rather remove a monster, but that is possible to do if you want to do it. I still don't know if I'm going to stick with this or not, but it is a good card, but I wouldn't play more than one. And then, since we don't play 3 copies of this anymore, and I can't get my Massive Gauge Excel, I do no longer play Ulti Buster. I just went back to Thunder Lance X Tempest Buster, which I play 3. This is the very first impact that we got for bots. Whenever you make... you can only cast this card if your opponent's life is 5 or less. Your cards have attacked 3 times or more during this turn, and neither you nor your opponent has a monster in the center. Link attacks count as 1 attack. Pay 3 gauge, deal 5 damage to your opponent. This card cannot be nullified, the damage cannot be reduced, and if your opponent's life would hit 0 by this card, it cannot be changed by your opponent's cards. So they can't revive themselves, pretty much. Yeah, unrevivable. So 3 copies of that for the impact. You can still play Ulti Buster if you want, but I think this is just the safer bet because you will just be able to push out so much damage anyway, because bots, say you have Satsuki, you know, even if you get both of them to hit your opponent once, that's 5 damage right there. So I really don't see the need for Ulti Buster. You know, I played Ulti Buster not because the deck needed it, but because the previous build, you gauged so fucking much that it made sense to play Ulti Buster, because you could pretty much hack it. And you know, even with these 3 cards getting hit, this deck is still very much a threat, and it is still considered one of the top decks in my opinion. I think if you think this deck literally succeeded only because of the brokenness of these 3 cards, you're not giving the deck enough respect, in my opinion. As for sideboard, my sideboard currently is basically the same as it was in Texas. So you can go check out the old Texas deck profile if you want to see it. However, I will say one card that is in here now that wasn't in there, that I am considering now for main decking, is this, which is Demonic Slay Battle Aura Bind. It is Dragon World and Danger World dual world spell. You pay 1 life when you activate this, and then you get to rest a card on your opponent's field with critical less or equal to the item that you have equipped. So if you have Satsuki equipped, you can cast this to rest any monster on your opponent's field that has 3 crits or less. So I am looking at that as an option, because remember, when you equip a monster as an item, it is still considered a item, even though it is a monster, so keep that in mind. So anyway, guys, that is my Thunder Empire deck after the ban list and how it's sitting at the moment. There is still a lot of other things I want to test out, but I just wanted to show you that there are other cards out there, and maybe a way that you can take your Thunder Empire deck and edit it if you're just not ready to let it go. I'll be honest, I'm not real crazy about Garga, which is Yuga Mikado, Gao's son's buddy. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure I'll probably still end up building Garga just because I like Dragon World decks, but I still like Bots more. Bots is probably my 2nd favorite Dragon World monster there is, or Dragon World Dragon, you know what I mean, even though he's considered Thunder Empire. But, you know, do not think, like I said, just because of the changes that was made to the rules in the deck, that this can't work. This deck is still very viable, and I still think people should be planning to see it. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this deck profile. Like I stated in my Kagero standard deck profile, I will be doing a Q&A soon, so if you have questions regarding meta, regarding deck building, whatever, just throw them down in the comment section below, and I will get around to it as soon as I can. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. Leave anything below that you would like to say, or comments, or concerns, or questions, or whatever. So thanks for watching. Make sure you leave a like, comment, subscribe, thumbs up the video for me, and I'll see you next time.